From the days of no shot clock to no three-point line, the game has evolved drastically. In fact, it's now more quantifiable than it has ever been. From advanced metrics to compared statistics, the game is now represented through numbers and adds a new layer to the game that we watch and love. But the one thing that has been constant since the inception of the sport is intangibles. And no, that's not another superhero group that's going to take on the Avengers. Although the idea of the best defender in the league taking on Iron Man does sound enticing. But intangibles is very important. You have players like Marcus Smart, whose tenacity adds to the aura of the Boston Celtics. Yes, they haven't been doing great recently, but his ability to take on defenders and exude so much energy uplifts the entire team. You look at someone like Draymond Green, whose knowledge adds so much to the game. From the days of winning the championship with the Golden State Warriors, his experience has always grown. And now he's inculcating that amongst the youngsters in the team. I mean, you just go back a couple months ago when they faced the Toronto Raptors. He was the one who drew the final play. He knew exactly what was going to happen. He predicted the back screen, the cut, the switch. He predicted everything, and it ultimately led to Pascal Siakam having to take the final shot on his own. And he missed, and that's what led the Warriors to that win. And these intangibles may not show on the score sheets, but it's so crucial to every team that attracts success. You do have players who bring both the intangibles and ability that show on the box scores. Simple example, LeBron James. One of the best players in the world. His aura speaks for himself. You're going up against LeBron James. He is going to be an overwhelming force. And he always is. It's because that's what he has done for so long. And it will always translate. That does not always translate into leadership, though. It's a different intangible. And leadership is a quality that very few people have. And a person who has a mix of almost everything. He has great numbers on the score sheets. He has leadership. He has the ability to inculcate a winning mentality in a team. It's Chris Paul. Since the day he has been in the league, even before that, he has always made teams better. He was a 4th overall pick. He dominated amongst the rookies. He led in points, assists, steals. He actually led the league in steals, not just the rookies. And he rightfully won Rookie of the Year. His sophomore year, he was in the All-NBA team. He was in the All-Defensive team. He made the Hornets great. And you could see the tangible change in the team with his presence. Soon after, he moved to LA, the Clippers. He could have gone to the Lakers, but that's a murky situation. For the Clippers, he formed Lob City. And Lob City was the most fun team to watch at the time. The Clippers were not doing great at the time, and he elevated that team with the help of DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, and they dominated for a bit. Not in terms of winning, but in terms of headlines, they were the team. They had a few good playoff runs, didn't go too far. He then went to Houston with James Harden next to him. And they really clicked well together initially. They won 65 games, which is a franchise record. And they were great. I think they were the first team to score more threes than twos. And that's incredible if you think about it. It was also an indictment of how the league was going. The game was becoming a more three-point based game. And despite not being the best three-point shooter, Chris Paul played an incredible role in aiding the shooters around him. And that's what got the team flowing. He then went to OKC, which was clearly in rebuild mode. And he still got that team to the playoffs. They did really well. They lost in Game 7 to Houston. And now he's in Phoenix. His winning mentality has catapulted every team to success. For such a winning player, he doesn't have a ring. In fact, he doesn't even have an appearance in the NBA Finals, which is shocking if you think about it, considering the teams he's been in, the way he plays. It doesn't make sense that he not only doesn't have a ring, but not even a finals appearance. And when you look back, it kind of makes sense in terms of where things went wrong. You go back to LA, and in 2014, that in the Western semifinals, that game against OKC, Game 5, they were leading by 7 with 49 to go. It seemed like it was over. They had to seal that game. And then 2 turnovers by him, the foul near the end, he read that game wrong at that point. And it's almost inexcusable. You then go the year after. Again, I understand after you have such a glorious opportunity, and when that goes, it's hard to get going again. And that's what happened with the team. The year after, they felt good, but they lost to a hobbled Houston team. Their main player, Harden, wasn't really in that. It was a weird phase for Houston as well. And they still couldn't capitalize. There was infighting between him, Blake Griffin, and with controversy, ultimately he left and went to Houston. He then went to Houston. Him and James Harden had rifts. But it all stems from the fact that Chris Paul really has a different approach to the game. His winning mentality comes at the cost of almost a lack of malleability. He plays the way he plays, and if the team around him buys into that, that's great. But with someone like James Harden, who is an established star himself, it's really hard to do that. Unless you see eye to eye, it's really hard to form that bond that can carry you deep into the playoffs. Because as great as regular season success is, the playoffs is a different game. You need a different mindset going into that. And for some reason or the other, Chris Paul has never been able to push his team far enough. Yes, the injury was terrible. And actually that injury and the performance thereafter by the Houston Rockets is an indictment of how important he is to the team. Because after that injury, that Game 7, they missed 27 consecutive threes. That would never happen if he was playing. There's no way that would happen. He would help calm the team down, and he would get the team playing a different way, open up different avenues. And that just didn't happen. And they lost that series. The year after, again, once you have such a setback, it's hard to bounce. And they couldn't, and that's what happened. He then went to OKC. Again, he did better than people would have expected him to do. And that's important to know because for Chris Paul, it meant that this young team was malleable enough to do better than people thought they would. Again, he has impacted teams in ways that would have a lasting impact years down the line. He helped Shai Gilgeous-Alexander develop. He did. And now he's in Phoenix. And the instant thing you notice is how balanced the team is. A team that really lacked an identity. They had stars. They had DeAndre Ayton. They had Kelly Oubre. They had Devin Booker. They still have 2 of their main stars. But now they have a young core with Chris Paul leading them. And it works brilliantly. Every game, the synergy between them is beautiful. Chris Paul knows that he can get a high screen from DeAndre Ayton. He's got the option with him all the time. He's got Devin Booker getting past the screen and like being ready for a shot from the 3-point line, or he can drive in. The options he has in this team, you have Mikal Bridges, who is great defensively and on the offense line. You have Cameron Johnson, who is great. Off the bench, you have Jay Crowder, you have Dario Saric. You have a great team. And the fact is that this great team, well, you go back a year, they did not even make the playoffs. Yes, they had a great period in the bubble where they went undefeated and still didn't make the playoffs. But the year before that, they were bottom of the league. They were developing, but they needed that something to push them. They had talent. Devin Booker is like famous for that game that he had of 70 points. But that's consistent. He's a great shooter. He's a great scorer. And if you have someone like Chris Paul who can help take the ball away and create chances all over, that's exactly what this team needed. I mean, you just go back a day where they had the game against Utah and everyone was clamoring for a 7-game series of that. It was brilliant. Because Utah come at you with energy, that energy that just doesn't stop. You have players like Donovan Mitchell who are going to keep scoring. You have their defense which will keep rotating and moving and pushing you. It's suffocating. And that's exactly what happened. And they were able to keep up. Because, let's not forget, as good offensively as Phoenix are, their defense is incredible. DeAndre Ayton was immense on the boards that night. The entire team offers so much defensively and offensively. Its versatility aids it so much. Considering the playoffs now, it's a different game because every team that Chris Paul has been in has done really well in the regular season. Playoffs is a different beast. And this team does not have playoff experience. Chris Paul has not done great in a deep stretch. Yet this feels different. It feels like this team really works together as a unit. It has an identity, which I think even Chris Paul in a team lacked for a while. Even Phoenix had no identity before he came in. They had DeAndre Ayton, who was growing. You had Mikal Bridges, who was growing. Devin Booker was carrying the show. But you knew that team always had more about it. And now you're seeing that team develop. The playoffs, though, this season is stacked. You have the Denver Nuggets with potential MVP Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. Now they have Aaron Gordon, who has changed the team apparently. And you cannot forget the Milwaukee Bucks, who are a perennial threat because of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now they have Drew Holiday. You talk about the 76ers, who look much better now. You have the Lakers. They have players like LeBron and AD who are going to return. Utah Jazz are doing incredibly well. And then you have the villains in the Brooklyn Nets, who are really dominating because of the 5 all-star caliber players that they have. Regardless, you would not have this Phoenix team in the playoff conversation, but maybe they don't really want to be a part of that conversation. Maybe this is what works for them. They take each game as they come. They have a calming force in Chris Paul. And perhaps not being a part of this conversation is something that aids them. I mean, you go back a year, you had Miami Heat. You would not have had them in that conversation. But they willed themselves there because of Jimmy's leadership and the growth of players around him. It feels like a similar story here. But maybe there are more pieces here. I think you have better pieces in this Phoenix team to consistently deliver. And maybe this identity, this feeling of almost symmetry amongst the team, maybe that's exactly what Phoenix need. And that's exactly what Chris Paul needs. And maybe not being a part of this conversation is exactly what a Phoenix team with Chris Paul, who's running out of time as a starter and as a main option in the team, maybe this is exactly what they need. Oh, and welcome to the Conventional Mind.